from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 1991, federal law has stated that metropolitan planning organizations around the country should have local elected officials on their boards. In 2012, Congress passed MAP 21 and included a clause stating that these MPOs that were not in compliance had 2 years to conform. Now, previously, in the previous administration, there was a federal clause that was used to grandfather the Twin Cities, Minneapolis-St. Paul Metropolitan Council into compliance without having elected officials. So we now have in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region the only board in the country that is entirely non-elected. The only MPO that has the authority to independently raise taxes and is non-elected. Indeed, in Minneapolis-St. Paul, our metropolitan planning organization has a budget that dwarfs all the others in the country. In fact, it is larger than Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Seattle, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Boston, Philadelphia, Denver, Miami, Tampa, and Chicago combined. Now, why does an entity of this magnitude not require local elected officials? Now, I know some defending the status quo are now making misleading claims about this amendment, about our efforts here in Congress. Now, first, the Met Council does perform transportation work, and their Transportation Advisory Board does include elected officials. But the Federal Highway Administration and FAA ruled in 2015 that the TAB is an advisory body to the Council. It is not the MPO. Even the previous administration, the Obama administration, disagreed with the Met Council's assertion that the TAB would be equivalent to a local elected official. Second, the defenders of the status quo are asserting that total chaos will ensue if this amendment passes. It'll be a complete mess. Every other MPO was either formed in compliance with elected officials or local elected officials on its board, or came into compliance with this federal law, and none gained widespread attention for chaos. Now, the defenders of the status quo, including the current council and even the governor of the state, now assert that, well, this is too uncertain, that chaos would ensue. I would argue that having a 17-member board entirely appointed by the governor is uncertainty. Uncertainty is a board that changes course every time there's a new election in the governor's mansion. Finally, the critics of my amendment have begun stirring up the masses by saying this single-handedly stops federal funding for any transportation project in the area, even up to $2 billion by 2021. But in the past, when other MPOs have come into compliance, it hasn't had this effect. It simply hasn't happened. Besides, the congressional intent is that any MPO whose structure changes in an order to adhere to federal law will be given a transition period, a very generous one. The point is, this amendment does not put in jeopardy any current or future federal investments and grants. In fact, my colleagues and I from Minnesota have been working with the DOT to make certain our region gets the federal support we need. But it is vital, and it has been vital for years in our region, that we determine our own governance structure, that the local elected officials have a say. If the Twin Cities Metropolitan thinks it would take too large an effort to find common ground in order to pursue an MPO that has elected officials, then that's the best indication that there is a serious problem with the status quo. It is time to give citizens power over their regional government. I urge you all to support my amendment.